All right, everybody. So we are about to start chapter 8. In chapter 7, Ender was promoted into Salamander Army, and that was very intense. Lots of stuff happened. He was never really accepted by the leader and ended up being traded away at the end, even though he could have made some strategic improvements and he really could have been useful if given, an actual shot to be so. So now chapter 8 called Rat. So I'm sure that this is going to take us through him being reassigned to the Rat Army. Okay? I don't know. I'm hopeful, but I don't know for sure. Yeah, I think this one is much shorter than the last chapter. So hopefully this video will not go as long and not require two pieces. All right. Chapter 8, Rat. Colonel Graff, the games have always been run fairly before, either random distribution of stars or symmetrical. Fairness is a wonderful attribute, Major Anderson. It has nothing to do with war. The game will be compromised. The comparative standings will become meaningless. Alas, it will take months, years to develop the new battle rooms and run the simulations. That's why I'm asking you now to begin. Be creative. Think of every stacked, impossible, unfair star arrangement you can. Think of other ways to bend the rules. Late notification, unequal forces. Then run the simulations and see which ones are hardest, which easiest. We want an intelligent progression here. We want to bring him along. When do you plan to make him a commander? When he's 8? Of course not. I haven't assembled his army yet. Oh, so you're stacking it that way too. You're getting too close to the game, Anderson. You're forgetting that it is merely a training exercise. It's also status, identity, purpose, name. All that makes these children who they are comes out of this game. When it becomes known that the game can be manipulated, weighted, cheated, it will undo this whole school. I'm not exaggerating. I know. So I hope Ender Wiggin truly is the one, because you'll have degraded the effectiveness of our training method for a long time to come. If Ender isn't the one, if his peak of military brilliance does not coincide with the arrival of our fleet at the Bugger homeworlds, then it doesn't really matter what our training method is or isn't. I hope you will forgive me, Colonel Graff, but I feel that I must report your orders and my opinion of their consequences to the Strategos and Hegemon. Why not our dear Polemarch? Our dear Polemarch. Everybody knows you have him in your pocket. Such hostility, Major Anderson, and I thought we were friends. We are. And I think you may be right about Ender. I just don't believe you, and you alone, should decide the fate of the world. I don't even think it's right for me to decide the fate of Ender Wiggin. Oh, so you won't mind if I notify them? Of course I mind, you meddlesome dummy. This is something to be decided by people who know what they're doing, not these frightened politicians who got their office because they happen to be politically potent in the country they come from. But you understand why I'm doing it. Because you're such a short-sighted little bureaucratic jerk that you think you need to cover yourself in case things go wrong. Well, if things go wrong, we'll all be bugger meat. So trust me now, Anderson, and don't bring the whole hegemony down on my neck. What I'm doing is hard enough without them. Oh, is it unfair? Are things stacked against you? You can do it to Ender, but you can't take it? Is that it? Ender Wiggin is 10 times smarter and stronger than I am. What I'm doing to him will bring out his genius. If I had to go through it myself, it would crush me. Major Anderson, I know I'm wrecking the game, and I know you love it better than any of the boys who play. Hate me if you like, but don't stop me. I reserve the right to communicate with Hegemony and the Strategoi at any kind, but for now, Do what you want. Thank you so very kindly. Ender Wiggin, the little farthead who leads the standings. What a pleasure to have you with us. The commander of Rat Army lay sprawled on a lower bunk wearing only his desk. With you around, how can any army lose? Several of the boys nearby laughed. There could not have been two more opposite armies than Salamander and Rat. The room was rumpled, cluttered, noisy. After Bonso, Ender had thought that undiscipline would be a welcome relief. Instead, he found that he had come to expect quiet and order, and the disorder here made him uncomfortable. We doing okay, Ender Bender? Aye. Rose de Nose, Jew boy extraordinaire, and you ain't nothing but a pin-headed pinprick of a goy. Don't you forget it. Since the IF was formed, the strategos of the military forces had always been a Jew. There was a myth that Jewish generals didn't lose wars, and so far, it was still true. It made any Jew in the battle school dream of being the strategos and conferred prestige on him from the start. It also caused resentment. Rat Army was often called the Kike Force, half in praise, half in parody of Mazer Rackham's Strike Force. There were many who liked to remember that during the second invasion, even though an American Jew as president was hegemon of the alliance, an Israeli Jew was strategos, I think strategos, in overall command of IF defense, and a Russian Jew was pole march of the fleet. It was Mazer Rackham, a little-known, twice-court-martialed, half-Maori New Zealander whose strike force broke up and finally destroyed the bugger fleet in action around Saturn. If Mazer Rackham could save the world, then it didn't matter a bit whether you were a Jew or not, people said. But it did matter, and Rose the Nose knew it. He mocked himself to forestall the mocking comments of anti-Semites, almost everyone he defeated in battle, because, at least for a time, almost everyone he defeated in battle almost everyone he defeated in battle became, at least for a while, a Jew hater. But he also made sure everyone knew what he was. His army was in second place, bucking for first. I took you on, Goy, because I didn't want people to think I only win because I got grease suckers. No, what? Grease suckers? Because I only win because I got great soldiers. I want them to know that even with a little puke of a soldier like you, I can still win. We only got 3 rules here. Do what I tell you, and don't pee the bed. Ender nodded. He knew that Rose wanted him to ask what the 3rd rule was, so he did. That was 3 rules. We don't do too good in math here. The message was clear. Winning is more important than anything. Your practice sessions with the little launchies are over, Wiggin. Done. You're in a big boy's army now. I'm putting you in Dink Meeker's room. From now on, as far as you're concerned, Dink Meeker is God. Then who are you? The personnel officer who hired God, Rose grinned, and you are forbidden to use your desk again until you've frozen 2 enemy soldiers in the same battle. This order is out of self-defense. I hear you're a genius programmer. I don't want you screwing around with my desk. Everybody erupted in laughter. It took Ender a moment to understand why. Rose had programmed his desk to display and animate a bigger-than-life picture of male genitalia. Awkward! Which waggled back and forth as Rose wiggled the desk. This is just the sort of commander Bonso would trade me to, thought Ender. How does a boy who spends his time like this win battles. Ender found Dink Meeker in the game room, not playing, not sitting. No, not playing, just sitting and watching. A guy pointed you out, Ender said. I'm Ender Wiggin. I know, said Meeker. I'm in your tune. I know, he said again. I'm pretty inexperienced. Dink looked up at him. Look, Wiggin, I know all this. Why do you think I asked Rose to get you for me? He had not been dumped. He had been picked up. He had been asked for. Meeker wanted him. Why? Said Ender. Asked Ender. I've watched your practice sessions with the launchies. I think you show some promise. Balso is stupid, and I wanted you to get better something. No, I wanted you to get better training than Petra could give you. All she can do is shoot. I needed to learn that. You still move like you were afraid to wet your pants. So teach me. So learn. I'm not going to quilt my free time. No, I'm not going to quit my free time practice sessions. I don't want you to quit them. Rose the Nose does. Rose the Nose can't stop you. Likewise, he can't stop you from using your deck. So why did he order it? Listen, Ender. Commanders have just as much authority as you let them have. The more you obey them, the more power they have over you. What's to stop them from taking... What's to stop them from hurting me? Ender remembered Balso's blow. I thought that was why you were creaking a personal attack. What? I thought that's why you were taking personal attack classes. You've really been watching me, haven't you? Dink didn't answer. I don't want to get Rose mad at me. I want to be part of the battles now. I'm tired of sitting out till the end. Your standings will go down. This time, Ender didn't answer. Listen, Ender, as long as you're part of my tune, you're part of the battle. Ender soon learned why. Dink trained his tune independently from the rest of Rat Army. With discipline and vigor, he never consulted with Rose, and only rarely did the whole army maneuver together. It was as if Rose commanded one army and Dink commanded a much smaller one that happened to practice in the battle room at the same time. Okay, sorry. I had to go and get my charger and plug my computer in before it died. And so now I'm going to back up just a little bit to kind of get back into the flow of reading. Because for me, it's been a little while. I know for you, it's been seconds, but for me, it's been a little while. So be patient with me, please. All right? Okay. Ender found Dink Meeker in the game room, not playing, just sitting and watching. I pointed you out, Ender said. I'm Ender Wiggin. I know, said Meeker. Well, I'm in your tune. I know, he said again. I'm pretty inexperienced. Dink looked up at him. Look, Wiggin, I know all this. Why do you think I asked Rose to get you for me? He had not been dumped. He had been picked up. He had been asked for. Meeker wanted him. Why? Asked Ender. I've watched your practice sessions with the launchies. I think you show some promise. Monso is stupid, and I wanted you to get better training than Petra could give you. All she can do is shoot. I needed to learn that. You still move like you were afraid to wet your pants. So teach me. So learn. I'm not going to quit my free time practice sessions. I don't want you to quit them. Rose the Nose does. Rose the Nose can't stop you. Likewise, he can't stop you from using your desk. So Why did he order it? Listen, Ender, commanders have just as much authority as you let them have. The more you obey them, the more power they have over you. What's to stop them from hurting me? Ender remembered Bonso's blow. I thought that was why you were taking personal attack classes. You've really been watching me, haven't you? Dink didn't answer. I don't want to get Rose mad at me. I want to be part of the battles now. I'm tired of sitting out till the end. Your standings will go down. This time Ender didn't answer. Listen, Ender, as long as you're part of my toon, you're part of the battle. Ender soon learned why. Dink trained his toon independently from the rest of Rat Army with discipline and vigor. He never consulted with Rose and only rarely did the whole army maneuver together. It was as if Rose commanded one army and Dink commanded a much smaller one that happened to practice in the battle room at the same time. Dink started out the first practice by asking Ender to demonstrate his feet first attack position. The other boys didn't like it. How can we attack lying on our backs? They asked. To Ender's surprise, Dink didn't correct them, didn't say, you aren't attacking on your back, you're dropping downward toward them. He had seen what Ender was doing, but he had not understood the orientation that it implied. It soon became clear to Ender that even though Dink was very, very good, his persistence in holding on to the corridor gravity orientation instead of thinking of the enemy gate as downward was limiting his thinking. They practiced attacking an enemy-held star. Before trying Ender's feet first method, they had always gone in standing up, their whole bodies available as a target. Even now, though, they reached the star and then assaulted the enemy from one direction only. Over the top, cried Dink, and over they went. To his credit, he then repeated the exercise, calling, again, upside down. But because of their insistence on a gravity that didn't exist, the boys became awkward when the maneuver was under, as if vertigo seized them. They hated the feet first attack. Dink insisted that they use it. As a result, they hated Ender. Do we have to learn how to fight from a launchy? One of them muttered, making sure Ender could hear. Yes, answered Dink. They kept working. And they learned it. In practice skirmishes, they began to realize how much harder it was to shoot an enemy who was attacking feet first. As soon as they were convinced of that, they practiced the maneuver more willingly. That night was the first time Ender had come to one of his launchy practice sessions after a whole afternoon of work. He was tired. Now you're really in an army, said Eli. You don't have to keep practicing with us. Oh, excuse me. From you, I can learn things that nobody knows, said Ender. My hair is doing something strange. Sorry, guys. Dink Meeker is the best. I hear he's your toon leader. Then let's get busy. I'll teach you what I learned from him today. He put Eli and 24 others through the same exercises that had worn him out all afternoon. He put new touches on the patterns, made the boys try the maneuvers with one leg frozen, with both legs frozen, or using frozen boys for leverage to change directions. Halfway through the practice, Ender noticed Petra and Dink together, standing in the doorway watching. Later, when he looked again, they were gone. So they're watching me, and what we're doing is known. He did not know whether Dink was his friend. He believed that Petra was, but nothing could be sure. They might be angry that he was doing what only commanders and toon leaders were supposed to do, drilling and training soldiers. They might be offended that a soldier would associate so closely with launchies. It made him uneasy to have older children watching. I thought I told you not to use your desk. Rose the Nose stood by Ender's bunk. Ender did not look up. I'm completing the trigonometry assignment for tomorrow. Rose bumped his knee into Ender's desk. I said not to use it. Ender set the desk on his bunk and stood up. I need trigonometry more than I need you. Yikes. Rose was taller than Ender by at least 40 centimeters, but Ender was not particularly worried. It would not come to physical violence, and if it did, Ender thought he could hold his own. Rose was lazy and didn't know personal combat. "You're going down in the standings, boy," said Rose. "I expect to. I was only leading the list because of the stupid way Salamander Army was using me." "Stupid? Bonzo's strategy won a couple of key games." "Bonzo's strategy wouldn't win a salad fight. I was violating orders every time I fired my gun." Rose hadn't known that. It made him angry. "So everything Bonzo said about you was a lie. You're not only short and incompetent, you're insubordinate too." "But I turned defeat into stalemate all by myself." We'll see how you all mm-mm. We'll see how you do all by yourself next time." Rose went away. One of Ender's tune mates shook his head. "You dumb as a thumb." Ender looked at Dink, who was doodling on his desk. Dink looked up, noticed Ender watching him, and gazed steadily back at him. No expression. "Nothing." "Okay," thought Ender. "I can take care of myself." Battle came 2 days later. It was Ender's first time fighting as part of a tune. He was nervous. Dink's tune lined up against the right-hand wall of the corridor, and Ender was very careful not to lean, not to let his weight slip to either side. Stay balanced. "Wiggin!" called Rose the Nose. Ender felt dread come over him from throat to groin, a tingle of fear that made him shudder. Rose saw it. Shivering, trembling. "Don't wet your pants, little Launchy." Rose hooked a finger over the butt of Ender's gun and pulled him to the force field that hid the battle room from view. "We'll see how well you do now, Ender. As soon as that door opens, you jump through, go straight ahead towards the enemy's door." Suicide. Pointless, meaningless self-destruction. But he had to follow orders now. This was battle, not school. For a moment, Ender raged silently. Then he calmed himself. "Excellent, sir," he said. "The direction I fire my gun is the direction of their main contingent." Rose laughed. "You won't have time to fire anything, Pinbrick." The wall vanished. Ender jumped up, took hold of the ceiling handholds, and threw himself out and down, speeding toward the enemy door. It was Centipede Army, and they only began to emerge from their door when Ender was halfway across the battle room. Many of them were able to get under cover of stars quickly, but Ender had doubled up his legs under him and holding his pistol at his crotch. So like he's pulled up his legs like you would sit on your knees. And so he's holding his gun like between his knees to aim, using his shins as a shield. Okay. He was firing between his legs, between his knees, and freezing many of them as they emerged. They flashed his legs, but he had 3 precious seconds before they could hit his body and put him out of action. He froze several more, then flung out his arms in equal and opposite directions. The hand that held his gun ended up pointing toward the main body of the Centipede Army. He fired into the mass of the enemy, and then they froze him. A second later, he smashed into the force field of the enemy's door and rebounded with a crazy spin. He landed in a group of enemy soldiers behind a star. They shoved him off and spun him even more rapidly. He rebounded out of control through the rest of the battle, though gradually friction with the air slowed him down. He had no way of knowing how many men he had frozen before getting iced himself, but he did get the general idea that Rat Army won again, as usual. After the battle, Rose didn't speak to him. Ender was still first in the standings, since he had frozen 3, disabled 2, and damaged 7. There was no more talk about insubordination and whether Ender could use his desk. Rose stayed in his part of the barracks and left Ender alone. Dink Meeker began to practice instant emergence from the corridor. Ender's attack on the enemy while they were still coming out of the door had been devastating. If one man can do that much damage, think what a tune can do. Dink got Major Anderson to open a door in the middle of a wall, even during practice sessions, instead of just the floor level door, so they could practice launching under battle conditions. Word got around. From now on, no one could take 5 or 10 or 15 seconds in the corridor to size things up. The game had changed. More battles. This time, Ender played a proper role within a tune. He made mistakes. Skirmishes were lost. He dropped from first to second in the standings, then to fourth. Then he made fewer mistakes and began to feel comfortable within the framework of the tune, and he went back up to third, then second, then first. After practice one afternoon, Ender stayed in the battle room. He had noticed that Dink Meeker usually came late to dinner, and he assumed it was for extra practice. Ender wasn't very hungry, and he wanted to see what it was Dink practiced when no one else could see. But Dink didn't practice. He stood near the door, watching Ender. Ender stood across the room, watching Dink. Neither spoke. It was plain Dink expected Ender to leave. It was just as plain that Ender was saying no. Dink turned his back on Ender, methodically took off his flash suit, and gently pushed off from the floor. He drifted slowly toward the center of the room, very slowly, his body relaxing almost completely, so that his hands and arms seemed to be caught by almost non-existent air currents in the room. After the speed and tension of practice, the exhaustion, the alertness, it was restful just to watch him drift. He did it for 10 minutes or so before he reached another wall. Then he pushed off rather sharply, returned to his flash suit, and pulled it on. "Come on," he said to Ender. They went to the barracks. The room was empty since all the boys were at dinner. Each went to his own bunk and changed into regular uniforms. Ender walked to Dink's bunk and waited for a moment till Dink was ready to go. "Why did you wait?" asked Dink. "Wasn't hungry." "Well, now you know why I'm not a commander." Ender had wondered. "Actually, they promoted me twice and I refused." "Refused?" "The second time, they took away my old locker and bunk and desk, assigned me to a commander's cabin, and gave me an army, but I just stayed in the cabin until they gave in and put me back into somebody else's army." "Why?" "Because I won't let them do it to me. I can't believe you haven't seen through all this crap yet, Ender, but I guess you're young. These other armies, they aren't the enemy. It's the teachers. They're the enemy." Maybe we shouldn't read this book. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Sorry. It's the teachers. They're the enemy. They get us to fight each other, to hate each other. The game is everything. Win, win, win. It amounts to nothing. We kill ourselves, go crazy trying to beat each other, and all this time, those old jerks are watching us, studying us, discovering our weak points, deciding whether we're good enough or not. Well, good enough for what? I was 6 years old when they brought me here. What did I know? They decided I was right for the program, but nobody ever asked me if the program was right for me. "So why don't you go home?" Dink smiled crookedly. "Because I can't give up the game." He tugged at the fabric of his flash suit, which lay on the bunk beside him. "Because I love this." "So why not be a commander?" Dink shook his head. "Never. Look what it does to Rosen. The boy's crazy, rose to nose. Sleeps in here with us instead of in his cabin. Why? Because he's scared to be alone, Ender. Scared of the dark." "Rose?" "But they made him a commander, and so he has to act like one. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's winning, but that scares him worst of all because he doesn't know why he's winning, except that I have something to do with it. Any minute, somebody could find out that Rosen isn't some magic Israeli general who can win no matter what. He doesn't know why anybody wins or loses. Nobody does." "It doesn't mean he's crazy, Dink." "I know. You've been here a year. You think these people are normal. Well, they're not. We're not. I look in the library. I call up books on my desk. Old ones because they won't let us have anything new, but I've got a pretty good idea what children are, and we're not children. Children can lose sometimes and nobody cares. Children aren't in armies. They aren't commanders. They don't rule over 40 other kids. It's more than anybody can take and not get crazy. Ender tried to remember what other children were like in his class at school back in the city, but all he could think of was Stilson. I had a brother, just a normal guy. All he cared about was girls and flying. He wanted to fly. He used to play ball with the guys, a pickup game, shooting balls at a hoop, dribbling down the corridors until the peace officers confiscated your ball. We had a great time. He was teaching me how to dribble when I was taken. Ender remembered his own brother, and the memory was not fond. Dink misunderstood the expression on Ender's face. Hey, I know, nobody's supposed to talk about home, but we came from somewhere. The battle school didn't create us. The battle school doesn't create anything. It just destroys. And we all remember things from home. Maybe not good things, but we remember and then we lie and pretend that, look, Ender, why is it that nobody talks about home ever? Doesn't that tell you how important it is that nobody even admits that? Oh, man. No, it's all right, Ender said. I was just thinking about Valentine, my sister. I wasn't trying to make you upset. Oh, it's okay. I don't think of her very much because I always get like this. That's right. We never cry. I never thought of that. Nobody ever cries. We really are trying to be adults, just like our fathers. I bet your father was like you. I bet he was quiet and took it and then busted out, and I'm not like my father. So maybe I'm wrong. But look at Bonso, your old commander. He's got an advanced case of Spanish honor. He can't allow himself to have weaknesses. To be better than him, that's an insult. To be stronger, that's like cutting at his heart. So that's why he hates you, because you didn't suffer when he tried to punish you. He hates you for that. He honestly wants to kill you. He's crazy. They're all crazy. And you aren't? I'd be crazy too, little buddy, but at least when I'd be craziest, I'd be floating all alone in space, and the crazy, she flowed out of me. She soak into the walls, and she don't come out till there be battles and little boys bump into the walls and squish out the crazy. Hinder smiled. And you be crazy too, said Dink. Come on, let's go eat. Maybe you can be a commander and not be crazy. Maybe knowing about craziness means you don't have to fall for it. I'm not going to let those jerks run me, Ender. They've got you pegged too, and they don't plan to treat you kindly. Look what they've done to you so far. They haven't done anything except promote me. And she make you life so easy, eh? Ender laughed and shook his head. So, maybe you're right. They think they got you on ice. Don't let them. But that's what I came for, Ender said, for them to make me into a tool to save the world. I can't believe you still believe it. Believe what? The bugger menace. Save the world. Listen, Ender, if the buggers were coming back to get us, they'd be here. They aren't invading again. We beat them and they're gone. But the videos, all from the first and second invasions. Your grandparents weren't born yet. When Mazer Rackham wiped them out, you watch. It's all a fake. There is no war, and they're just messing around with us. But why? Because as long as people are afraid of the buggers, the IF can stay in power. And as long as the IF is in power, certain countries can keep their hegemony. But keep watching the vids, Ender. People will catch on to this game pretty soon, and there'll be a civil war to end all wars. That's the menace, Ender, not the buggers. And in that war, when it comes, you and I won't be friends because you're American, just like our dear teachers, and I am not. They went to the mess hall and ate, talking about other things. But Ender could not stop thinking about what Dink had said. The battle school was so enclosed, the game so important in the minds of the children that Ender had forgotten there was a world outside. Spanish, honor, civil war, politics. The battle school really was a very the battle school was really a very small place, wasn't it? But Ender did not reach Dink's conclusions. The buggers were real. The threat was real. The IF controlled a lot of things, but it didn't control the videos and the nets. Not where Ender had grown up. In Dink's home in the Netherlands, with 3 generations under Russian hegemony, perhaps it was all controlled, but Ender knew that lies could not last long in America. So he believed. Interesting. Interesting. Believed, but the seed of doubt was there, and it stayed. And every now and then sent out a little root. It changed everything to have that seed growing. It made Ender listen more carefully to what people meant instead of what they said. It made him wise. There weren't as many boys at the evening practice, not by half. "Where's Bernard?" asked Ender. Eli grinned. Shin closed his eyes and assumed a look of blissful meditation. I'm sorry, this is ugly. "Haven't you heard?" said another boy, a Launchie from a younger group. "Word's out that any Launchie who comes to your practice sessions won't ever amount to anything in anybody's army. Word's out that the commanders don't want any soldiers who have been damaged by your training." Ender nodded. "But the way I brain it," said the Launchie, "I'd be the best soldier I can, and any commander worth his salt he'd take me, nah?" "Eh," said Ender, with finality. They went on with practice. About a half hour into it, when they were practicing throwing off collisions with frozen soldiers, several commanders in different uniforms came in. They ostentatiously took down names. Okay, so they were very obvious about it, like making sure that everybody knew what they were doing. "Hey!" shouted Eli. "Make sure you spell my name right." The next night, there were even fewer boys. Now, Ender was hearing the stories. Little Launchies getting slapped around in the bathrooms, or having accidents in the mess hall and the game room, or getting their files trashed by older boys who had broken the primitive security system that guarded the Launchies' desks. We're almost done? Yes, actually we are. "No practice tonight," Ender said. "Oh, yeah? There is so," said Eli. "Give it a few days. I don't want any of the little kids getting hurt. If you stop, even just one night, they'll figure out it works to do this kind of thing. Just like if you'd ever back down to Bernard back when he was being a swine." "Besides," said Shen, "we aren't scared, and we don't care, so you owe it to us to go on. We need the practice, and so do you." Ender remembered what Dink had said. The game was trivial compared to the whole world. Why should anybody give every night of his life to this stupid game? "We don't accomplish that much anyway," Ender said. He started to leave. Eli stopped him. "They scare you too? They slap you up in the bathroom? Stick you head in the toilet? Somebody got a gun up your butt?" "No," Ender said. "You still my friend?" asked Eli, even more quietly. "Yes, then I still you friend, Ender, and I stay here and practice with you." The older boys came again, but fewer of them were commanders. Most were members of a couple of armies. Ender recognized salamander uniforms, even a couple of rats. They didn't take names this time. Instead, they mocked and shouted and ridiculed as the Launchies tried to master difficult skills with untrained muscles. It began to get to a few of the boys. "Listen to them," Ender said to the other boys. "Remember the words. If you ever want to make your enemy crazy, shout that kind of stuff at them. It makes them do dumb things, to be mad, but we don't get mad. Shin took the idea to heart, and after each jibe from the older boys, he had a group of 4 launchies recite the words loudly 5 or 6 times. When they started singing the taunts like nursery rhymes, some of the older boys launched themselves from the wall and came out for a fight. The flash suits were designed for wars fought with harmless light, the guns. They offered little protection and seriously hampered movement if it came to hand fighting in Nolo. Half the boys were flashed anyway and couldn't fight, but the stiffness of their suits made them potentially useful. Ender quickly ordered his launchies to gather in one corner of the room. The older boys laughed at them even more, and some who had waited by the wall came forward to join in the attack, seeing Ender's group in retreat. Ender and Ally decided to throw a frozen soldier in the face of an enemy. The frozen launchie struck helmet first, and the two caromed off of each other. So they're like, boing, like hit and then went different directions. Oh no, I lost my place. The older boy clutched his chest where the helmet had hit him and screamed in pain. Ooh, I can't even imagine. The mockery was over. The rest of the older boys launched themselves to enter the battle. Ender didn't really have much hope of any of the boys getting away without some injury, but the enemy was coming haphazardly, uncoordinatedly. They had never worked together before, while Ender's little practice army, though there were only a dozen of them now, knew each other well and knew how to work together. "Go Nova!" shouted Ender. The other boys laughed. They gathered into 3 groups, feet together, squatting, holding hands, so they formed small stars against the back wall. "We'll go around them and make for the door now." At his signal, the 3 stars burst apart, each boy launching in a different direction but angled so he could rebound off a wall and head for the door. Since all of the enemy were in the middle of the room, where course changes were far more difficult, it was an easy maneuver to carry out. Ender had positioned himself so that when he launched, he would rendezvous with the frozen soldier he had just used as a missile. The boy wasn't frozen now, and he let Ender catch him, whirl him around, and send him toward the door. Unfortunately, the necessary result of the action was for Ender to head in the opposite direction and at a reduced speed. Alone of all his soldiers, he was drifting fairly slowly, and at the end of the battle room where the older boys were gathered. He shifted himself so he could see that all his soldiers were safely gathered at the far wall. In the meantime, the furious and disorganized enemy had just spotted him. Ender calculated how soon he would reach the wall so he could launch again. Not soon enough. Several enemies had already rebounded toward him. Ender was startled to see Stilson's face among them. Then he shuddered and realized he had been wrong. Still, it was the same situation, and this time they wouldn't sit still for a single combat settlement. There was no leader, as far as Ender knew, and these boys were a lot bigger than him. Still, he had learned some things about weight shifting in personal combat class and about the physics of moving objects. Game battles almost never got to hand-to-hand combat. You never bumped into an enemy that wasn't frozen unless you were frozen yourself. So in the few seconds he had, Ender tried to position himself to receive his guests. Fortunately, they knew as little about Nolo fighting as he did, and the few who tried to punch him found that throwing a punch was pretty ineffective when their bodies moved backward just as quickly as their fists moved forward. But there were some in the group who had bone breaking on their minds, as Ender quickly saw. He didn't plan to be there for it, though. He caught one of the punchers by the arm and threw him as hard as he could. It hurled Ender out of the way of the rest of the first onslaught, though he still wasn't getting any closer to the door. "Stay there!" he shouted at his friends, who obviously were forming up to come and rescue him. Just stay there. Someone caught Ender by the foot. The tight grip gave Ender some leverage. He was able to stamp firmly on the other boy's ear and shoulder, making him cry out and let go. If the boy had let go just as Ender kicked downward, it would have hurt him much less and allowed Ender to use the maneuver as a launch. Instead, the boy had hung on too well. His ear was torn and scattering blood in the air, and Ender was drifting even more slowly. I'm doing it again, thought Ender. I'm hurting people again just to save myself. Why don't they leave me alone so I don't have to hurt them? 3 more boys were converging on him now, and this time they were acting together. Still, they had to grab him before they could hurt him. Ender positioned himself quickly so that 2 of them would take his feet, leaving his hands free to deal with the third. Sure enough, they took the bait. Ender grasped the shoulders of the third boy's shirt and pulled him up sharply, butting him in the face with his helmet. Again, a scream and a shower of blood. The 2 boys who had his legs were wrenching at them, twisting them. Ender threw the boy with the bleeding nose at one of them. They entangled, and Ender's leg came free. It was a simple matter then to use the other boy's hold for leverage to kick him firmly in the groin, then shove off him in the direction of the door. He didn't get that good a launch, so his speed was nothing special, but it didn't matter. No one was following him. He got to his friends at the door. They caught him and handed him along to the door. They were laughing and slapping him playfully. You bad, they said. You scary. You flame. Practice is over for the day, Ender said. They'll be back tomorrow, said Shen. Won't do them any good, said Ender. If they come without suits, we'll do this again. If they come with suits, we can flash them. Besides, said Eli, the teachers won't let it happen. Ender remembered what Dink had told him and wondered if Eli was right. Hey, Ender, shouted one of the older boys as Ender left the battle room. You nothing, man. You be nothing. My old Commander Bonso, said Ender. I think he doesn't like me. Ender checked the rosters on his desk that night. 4 boys turned up on medical report. 1 with bruised ribs, 1 with a bruised testicle, 1 with a torn ear, and 1 with a broken nose and a loose tooth. The cause of injury was the same in all cases. Accidental collision in Null G. If the teachers were allowing that to turn up on the official report, it was obvious they didn't intend to punish anyone for the nasty little skirmish in the battle room. Aren't they going to do anything? Don't they care what goes on in this school? Since he was back to the barracks earlier than usual, Ender called up the fantasy game on his desk. It had been a while since he last used it, long enough that it didn't start him where he had left off. Instead, he began by the giant's corpse. Only now it was hardly identifiable as a corpse at all, unless you stood off a ways and studied it. The body had eroded into a hill, entwined with grass and vines. Only the crest of the giant's face was still visible, and it was white bone, like limestone protruding from a discouraged, withering mountain. Ender did not look forward to fighting with the wolf children again, but to his surprise, they weren't there. Perhaps, killed once, they were gone forever. Made him a little sad. He made his way down underground through the tunnels to the cliff ledge overlooking the beautiful forest. Again he threw himself down, and again a cloud caught him and carried him into the castle turret room. The snake began to unweave itself from the rug again, only this time Ender did not hesitate. He stepped on the head of the snake and crushed it under his foot. It writhed and twisted under him, and in response he twisted and ground it deeper into the stone floor. Finally, it was still. Ender picked it up and shook it till it unwove itself and the pattern in the rug was gone. Then, still dragging the snake behind him, he began to look for a way out. Instead, he found a mirror. And in the mirror, he saw a face that he easily recognized. It was Peter, with blood dripping down his chin and a snake's tail protruding from a corner of his mouth. Ender shouted and thrust his desk from him. The few boys in the barracks were alarmed at the noise, but he apologized and told them it was nothing. They went away. He looked again into his desk. The figure was still there, staring into the mirror. He tried to pick up some of the furniture to break the mirror, but it could not be moved. The mirror would not come off the wall either. Finally, Ender threw the snake at it. The mirror shattered, leaving a hole in the wall behind it. Out of the hole came dozens of tiny snakes, which quickly bit Ender's figure again and again, tearing the snake. Tearing the snakes frantically from itself. The figure collapsed and died in a writhing heap of small serpents. Ugh. The screen went blank, and words appeared. Play again. Ender signed off and put the desk away. The next day, several commanders came to Ender or sent soldiers to tell him not to worry. Most of them thought the extra practice sessions were a good idea. He should keep it up. He should keep it up. And to make sure nobody bothered him, they were sending a few of their older soldiers who needed extra practice to come join him. They're as big as most of the buggers who attacked you last night. They'll think twice. Instead of a dozen boys, there were 45 that night, more than an army. And whether it was because of the presence of older boys on Ender's side or because they had had enough the night before, none of their enemies came. Ender didn't go back to the fantasy game, but it lived in his dreams. He kept remembering how it felt to kill the snake, grinding it in, the way he tore the ear off that boy, the way he destroyed Stilson, the way he broke Bernard's arm. And then to stand up, holding the corpse of his enemy, and find Peter's face looking out at him from the mirror. This game knows too much about me. This game tells me filthy lies. I am not Peter. I don't have murder in my heart. And then a worse fear, that he was a killer, only better at it than Peter ever was. That it was this very trait that pleased the teachers. It's killers they need for the bugger wars. It's people who can grind the enemy's face into the dust and spatter their blood all over space. Well, I'm your man. I'm the bloody guy you wanted when you had me spawned. I'm your tool, and what difference does it make if I hate the part of me that you most need? What difference does it make that when the little serpents killed me in the game, I agreed with them and was glad? Poor Ender.